You are listening to the Power Women in Green podcast. I'm your host, Ellen Hyukuma. I get to talk to a power woman in green. These women are doing business in a new way, and it's feminine and from the heart. Behind every one of these women in sustainable business, there's a story worth being told. Join me and learn from her road to success and how to incorporate her knowledge into your own life and career. Elizabeth is an integrative Chinese medicine practitioner and acupuncturist. She has studied with Dr. Andrew Weil. She shares ancient wisdom for the modern woman. Elizabeth specializes in women's health, weight management, allergies, autoimmune diseases, and environmental issues. So, Dr. Elizabeth Trattner, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's great to be here.
So great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's amazing to have you. You're all the way in Miami and the sun is shining, and I'm in the Netherlands and it's stormy.
Yes, it's beautiful here today. And it's beautiful here being here today also as well.
Nice. So firstly, can you please talk a little bit about your own personal journey and how it led to becoming an integrative Chinese medicine practitioner?
So I always wanted to be a doctor, and most of you don't remember encyclopedias. And so when I was young, I actually used to read the World Book Volume 8, which was the health edition or the health volume of World Book. And I remember just constantly going through pages. And at that time, they had like the glassine plates that was like the skeleton, and then the muscles, and then the organs, or I guess it's skeletal organs, muscles, and then the skin, and memorizing that. And I was fascinated with the human body, and I wanted to be a doctor, but unfortunately I got sick while I was in college. And so that kind of derailed that dream. And after I finished college, I was gravely ill, and I did a lot of work to get myself well. And then I lived in Tucson, Arizona, and Dr. Andrew Weil was in Tucson as well. It was very early on in the integrative medicine movement. It was actually alternative medicine at the time. He became my doctor. He took me under his wing, and he began mentoring me, probably like 1990, I think it was. I got better. And I remember he said to me, "What am I going to do with you? Am I going to send you to medical school? Am I going to send you to PA school?" And then we decided on acupuncture because in the state of Florida, it had a very, very wide scope of practice. And so that's why we went the route via Chinese medicine as opposed to, let's say, something like naturopathy that has a great scope of practice. But strangely enough, in the state of Florida, naturopathy is illegal. Don't ask me why. So at the time, we decided for Chinese medicine. I went to school. And so I've been practicing integrative medicine actually longer than I've been practicing Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine is an incredible system of healthcare. And so I use both equally. And so Chinese medicine was really the vehicle in which I practice integrative medicine. And then also in that time, or in the early 90s, I went to the Natural Gourmet Institute. I became a natural gourmet chef. And in 2008, I did an integrative medical rotation at the University of Arizona. I was their guest. I was the first acupuncture physician to be extended that huge honor. And then in 2014, I was the first class of certified integrative medical practitioners that went through their integrative. It was called iHelp, and it was for non-MD practitioners, so PhDs, pharmacists, nurses, acupuncture physicians. You know, we had a huge group of very different people that went through that course. Really, the whole, I don't want to say ancillary, but anyone who wasn't an MD or a DO went through that program. And so that was wonderful. So I've been practicing integrative medicine for a very, very long time, dually certified out of the University of Arizona, and natural gourmet chef, and then a whole bunch of other things that I'm probably forgetting.
And you have your own practice, right?
I do have my own practice. For a while, I had an integrative medicine practice here in South Florida. It was wonderful. I practiced with a psychologist, a psychiatrist, an integrative MD who was actually out of the University of Arizona as well. It was wonderful. And about 7 years, I went on my own. And so I've just been practicing by myself.
Very cool. Your specialty is women's health?
Yeah.
I think you mentioned you've already been advocating women's health since you were 16. What is one thing you see women doing these days that they think is healthy, but actually isn't?
Okay, so, that's an interesting question. So, health has changed very much so. So, being healthy, really in the 80s, the 70s, 80s, 90s was kind of called counterculture. And I would say in the last 5 years, um, health and wellness has actually become quite faddish. You could even say fashionable. But there's a lot of misinformation out there. And because of digital media, we instantly have information at our fingertips, but sometimes that information isn't correct. And it may not be correct for that person who's reading it. And all bodies are different. All bodies' needs are different. So you could have three women in a room and they need to eat three different ways. And I think that that's really, really important for people who are listening to this podcast or watching this podcast to understand that your friend may do really, really well on a raw vegan diet, but you may need to be eating cooked food. It's based on your genetics. It's based on your health history. And so that's very, very concerning for me because I'm seeing a lot of women become amenorrheic. That means they're losing their periods, they're losing their hair, they don't have energy, they're not grounded because they're trying something that looks beautiful, which is beautiful, but may not be right for them. And that to me is just, it's the double-edged sword of social media that we are really learning more and seeing more, but then we may not be using it correctly.
Interesting. And I like what you said, grounding. So food can also ground you.
Right. So in Chinese medicine, there's acupuncture, there's herbs, there's dietary therapy, there's movement therapy, and then there's body therapies like massage. And so Chinese dietetics actually looks at a patient. Are they hot or cold? Are they excess or deficient? Is their energy moving freely? Is their blood moving freely? And a lot of times young women who are on these diets aren't grounding. And, grounding food is things like animal protein, it's cooked foods. It can be really anything. What concerns me is, I can talk to a patient and within seconds I can tell if they're eating either, it's really more of a vegan raw diet, which I think for some people that is okay. But for a lot of women, it may not necessarily be correct. They're a little spacey, or they're women who've had children. Childbearing takes a lot out of your body. I'm not saying that it's not amazing because I have a child. I have a 20-year-old daughter. But I think what women aren't realizing is that you have to nourish your body. You lose a lot of blood after you had a baby. They compare it to like running 2 marathons, and, eating a raw vegan diet after you had a baby may not be the best thing. And I have my own personal story about that. I was eating really well after I had my daughter. I wasn't losing my baby weight. I was all puffy. This is 20 years ago. And I actually took a Chinese dietary course. This is, wow, a long time ago. And they talked about women who've had children who are depleted from childbirth need to eat a cooked diet, cook vegetables and nothing raw. And I was like, you know what? I'll try it, whatever. I'll give it anything a try because I was doing Pilates, I was exercising. I could carry like a sofa on my back, but I wasn't losing my weight. Within 6 weeks, I dropped 15 pounds by eating a cooked diet because that's what my body needed. And so for me, that was an incredible lesson about, what we see is not necessarily what's right for us. And so within those 20 years, I've had to talk to women and say, our bodies go through phases, and it could be childbirth, it could be trauma, it could be stress, it could be moving, it could be a breakup. And all of those things affect the ecology of the inside of our bodies. And we really need to take note of that and really kind of honor that, and not just what we're seeing on Instagram or what we're reading or what your best friend's doing.
Yeah. So that leads to, there are many influencers out there inspiring young women to eat it in certain ways and consume certain products. What is good and what is bad about this?
So, for instance, I just did a piece on functional mushrooms. Functional mushrooms are great. They've been around for 5,000 years. Um, and the piece was on social media. Well, a lot of people may not realize that there's more than like button mushrooms or portobello mushrooms, and that there's a whole wide world of functional mushrooms. And those functional mushrooms actually can boost your immune system. They've been part of Chinese materia medica for about 5,000 years, and using them can actually boost your immune system. That's like a really great thing about social media. One of the bad things about social media is that there could be somebody talking about, I don't know, like a certain type of algae or a certain sort of toast, or I'm trying to keep this kind of neutral, or a certain kind of diet. There's a lot of influencers that, part of their line is like vegan proud. Okay, well, veganism may work beautifully for that person. And I think all of us need to eat more of a plant-based diet, but is that plant-based diet cooked or is it raw? It really depends who it is. And so I think a lot of women out there are really getting bombarded with imagery from social media of women who are very, very thin, who have really low BMIs, and think, okay, you know what? I want to be like her. I want to be super skinny. And that diet may not be right. I think we can all agree that there's a lot of issues, the way our food is grown, the way our animals are raised. But I was a vegan for a while, and literally I was crawling on the floor exhausted. It did not work for me. And that's where we have to look at our genetics as opposed to looking at an Instagram influencer, which I think a lot of women really need to understand.
Yeah, very important. But it also seems quite difficult. Where do you begin? So where would one begin? Would one go to a Chinese medicine practitioner?
Well, Chinese medical practitioners are one. I think functional medicine doctors are another way of getting that good information, because a lot of functional medicine is really looking at your genetics. It's having blood work done. It's looking at your genetics, like your APOE gene, which is your fat taxi gene. That really helps you understand, are you better being a vegetarian? Are you better off having more of a paleo-based diet? Do you have more of a propensity towards diabetes? It's looking at heart disease, particle size. That's the beautiful thing about functional medicine, is really taking a look at what's going on inside of you personally to see if you carry the MTHFR gene, which is how you methylate. And, this may be kind of complicated for your audience, but integrative medicine doctors, functional medicine doctors, doctors of Chinese medicine, doctors like Dr. Weil, who've come out of the program of the University of Arizona, where we take a holistic approach to how you're eating and how you're living, but really also looking at your genetics and seeing what's right for you.
Yeah. No, I did not know what you were talking about with that gene.
I'm sorry. It's the APOE gene. It's your fat taxi gene. So you get a gene from your mom and you get a gene from your dad. So I'm what's called a 3-3. 3-3s are very, very common. 3-3s do better on more of a paleo-based diet. We have more of a propensity for diabetes. My dad is a diabetic. And we have to eat more of a paleo-based diet. And so, listen, I see a lot of young women that they are a 3-3. Most of these women are O blood types. And, that goes back really like far genetics. And, they're trying to eat a vegan diet or a vegetarian-based diet, which I completely commend, but it's not right for their bodies. They need more animal protein, and there's ways to get animal protein. That animals are ethically raised. They're ethically slaughtered, which I know is, if I think about it, I can put myself into a complete, tiz thinking about that. But, we are omnivores. We have been eating animals for 5,000 years. And I think that some of our bodies need it. And it's, I know it's not very chic or in vogue right now for people to eat animals, but some people like myself, my husband, my daughter, we need to eat them. And trust me, I was 12. I became a vegetarian for 2 years. I only did was eat peanut butter. This was back in Ohio. I gave up meat for 25 years. I had to start red meat. I had to start eating it again at 45. I did not get pregnant for 10 years until I started eating more turkey and chicken. I've written about this a lot for magazines about my story. And I think that there are just times and places in our lives that we have to really look at how we're feeling, what's going on, and also our genetics. And I think that's really, really important for listeners to hear that message, because, what you read may not necessarily be right for you. Go to a qualified clinician so we can take a look at you and really figure out what's best.
Very good. Yeah, I think I fall in that category. I tried veganism for a while and didn't work for me.
Yeah, I was like a bloated, exhausted mess.
Yeah, me too. And craving sugar constantly and caffeine.
Right,
I needed energy.
That pulls you up.
Yeah.
It's like it's a false sense of energy, when really, you may need that piece of chicken, or you may need those eggs. Or, listen, at 45, I started eating red meat. I ate it for about 6-7 years, and now I'm done with red meat. I'm in a phase of my life where I don't need red meat anymore. And that's okay. And that's really about honoring where you are in time and space and what your body needs.
Yeah. What can our listeners do to make lasting changes for her health and not have to set resolutions that might not last very long?
So I think with a lot of people who are, about a month out after the new year, people make these, I'm going to lose 5 pounds, or I'm going to not eat this and not eat that. And for a lot of my patients, for a lot of people I know, I'm like, don't make New Year's resolutions, or maybe not think about what you're eating per se. Think about your environment, what you're using, perhaps to clean your house. That's something that can be permanent. It's easy. It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry, I want to rip the refrigerator doors off. It can be changing your cleaning products, which is a lifelong habit that a lot of people don't think about. It's trying to get rid of EMFs in your house, or reduce your EMF load in your house. It could be getting out into nature more. Even if you work in a big city, there's parks, you can just walk outside. And those resolutions are sometimes a little bit easier to keep. Food for a lot of people, it's comfort. It can be drugs sometimes. People can have a love-hate relationship with food. A lot of women, I was just talking to my niece the other day who interviewed me, a lot of women can be orthorexic. They can be fixated on what they're putting into their bodies. And so we can make resolutions that don't have anything to do with food. And sometimes those are easier to keep because there's not that like emotional attachment to it.
Yeah, and actually also very important for your health, especially the cleaning products. Yeah.
Right. Cleaning products are air quality. I think another one that's really great to do is switch your beauty products. I'm very much an advocate for green beauty. 20 years ago, I wrote a chapter on botanicals and skin. Again, this was a long, long time ago. And we can start switching our beauty products over to green beauty products, that we're putting things on our body, which a lot of people don't realize. Our skin's our largest organ. And when we put products on our body, they're going right into our bloodstream. And so, maybe 1 month you switch your shampoo, and 1 month you switch the cream that you're using on your body, or the next month you change your razors out, those little strips. A lot of people are sensitive to those. That can be a process. That can be an easy process, and something that doesn't have to be so emotionally tied for a lot of women and men to food.
Interesting. You say the cosmetics go into our bloodstream right away.
Right.
Like, how important is it to avoid it? Like, what happens?
Well, once again, I think that you need to look at your genetics. Do you have neurological issues? Do you have allergies? I'm like, hello. Do you have sensitivities? Do you have sensitive skin? Most people don't think about, if you're under a hot shower, you're opening up the pores on your scalp. And then you're putting shampoo that lathers, and that has things like sodium lauryl sulfate and other chemicals, and that's just going right in. And people don't really think about that, but that's really important. Soap that you're using, you're in hot water, you're opening up your pores, and literally those chemicals like triclosan, again, sodium lauryl sulfate, which is a foaming agent, that goes right in. Obviously, I can't mention companies, but there's so many companies that are targeted to young women that the packaging is really pretty. Those fragrances are toxic. They're chemically derived. Those are going into your body. We know that those are endocrine disruptors. And little by little, we can make those changes over that year, that we can begin to incorporate cleaner, natural, organic products. And I think it's kind of a continuum. Don't go and toss out everything. It's a lot of money, and there's a really big learning curve when switching to green beauty products. Green beauty products a lot of times don't have preservatives. And so, here you have all these beautiful new things, and then, you keep them in your bathroom, or you live in Miami, Florida, and they can oxidize and go bad quickly. So that is something that over the course of a year, a listener or a reader can take that into account and just little by little start chipping away at that.
Yeah, that made me think about the younger girls, so maybe preteen, or what are they called, tweens, and them being targeted by companies which contain hormone disruptors.
Right.
How do you reach these women or these girls?
Well, excuse me. I think you reach
that
their
might
mothers.
Be a good.
Yeah,
and influencers are that's an area where the influencers are good, I think.
Well, I think I think that there are some good influencers out there, but they're not targeted to tweens. And I think that, a lot of, there's a couple of very good beauty influencers out there. They have a big following, but they're about 30 years old. And those 30-year-old women or late 20-year-old women don't have tweens. So I think, collectively for women my age, women that age, or people listening, if you have a niece or whatever, a cousin, we just need to educate each other. So I know you have a daughter, your daughter's too little, and my daughter's really old. And of course I was like the mean mom that I was like, no. We'd have a birthday and I was like, I hate this store. And that stuff would come in and I would just be like, sick, smelling it. We'd all have like headaches from it because, I live in a non-toxic house. I've lived in a non-toxic house for 20 years. And so, I was kind of like the mean mom. I'm like, you can't have that, but here's why. And so my daughter grew up educated. I'm laughing because I think about like, that poor kid was like the only kid who wasn't really allowed to go into those stores. Thank goodness when she did get older and I think, thank goodness, became more conscientious and she realized there was a connection to how she felt physically. Then, you see her hard work pay off and she'd come in and she was like, oh, I feel so gross. I went into the side of the store with my friend and I felt disgusting. My nose was running, my eyes were burning. I was like, yeah. So that message paid off instead of like, my mom won't let me have that. But, I think collectively, like women my age who have obviously older children, women in their mid 30s, I think are getting savvy. I do see a lot of women who are in their mid 30s, they're shopping at eco-friendly places, whether it's the grocery store. They're much more conscientious about using things on their babies. And hopefully, obviously, that's something that's going to carry through. But, these tweens that, are anywhere from 10 to 14 years old, their moms are maybe like late millennials or not really millennials, and then they're not women my age. So, we really need to educate them by kind of coming at them at both angles that, listen, you may not want to have your child do that. Like, or why did my kid get their period at 9 years old? I mean, these are things that, we really have to take a look at. And, my generation, your generation, the generation in between us, we really have to educate, all women. We have a responsibility to educate, our daughters, our nieces, our cousins, our aunts, everybody, really what these are doing to our bodies. And
I never really thought of that.
Yeah. And that's why I think we're seeing a huge, huge growth in green beauty products, is because the younger generations are getting, they're getting that message that, what, this isn't good for my kid, or, my kid went into precocious puberty. Why? Is it because of what they're eating? Is it because of what they're putting in their body? It's our cell phone lines. Unfortunately, it's our computers. It's things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. A 9-year-old getting their period is not good.
Yeah. Hormone disruptors at such a young age.
Yeah. And this isn't about, young girls. I mean, we see gynecomastia in men, in young men, and, I'm sure you can remember back, or for listeners, that one boy who was a little bit chubby. At least I remember we had this, one kid, and they had gynecomastia. These young men had breasts. It's because what they're putting in their bodies, it's the junk food, it's their surroundings. And, those men are more predisposed to male-based cancers later in their lives, and really need to kind of clean up their surroundings. Their parents need to do that. So it's not just women.
Yeah. If I were to go see you for treatment, what would the process be like?
Well, so what I do is I send patients an intake form ahead of time. And I tell my patients, I'm like, please fill this out. And then please go back and fill it out like 3 more times. Because I forgot this. Those are huge keys to the puzzle. So everybody forgets like the nosebleed they had when they were 10, or the strep throat they had 5 times when they were 9. And those things really help me identify, okay, if you've been having antibiotics when you were young, that did something to your system. Or if you had nosebleeds when you were a young woman, that plays into who you are today, even though people always forget, or fainting, or, there's everything I hear. So, that intake sheet comes in with a patient. I don't care how many colors of pen. And I sit with a patient for 3 hours, and I go through that intake, and I really do a deep dive into the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, really what's going on with that patient on all levels, what their health history's been, and really what their story is, because their story is what helps identify what's going on with them in the here and now. We see cycles, or I see cycles as a clinician, as a doctor of Chinese medicine and integrative medicine, that what is your story is paramount in helping diagnose a patient and treating them and getting them well.
Okay. And that's the beginning.
That is just the beginning. Follow-up appointments are about an hour and a half. I do acupuncture. I try to on the first treatment. Sometimes I don't get to it. Sometimes patients don't want acupuncture. They don't want, they're afraid of needles, and that's okay. Sometimes they just want to sit down and be with a clinician that hears them. Unfortunately, what's going on, at least in the medical system in the United States, doctors have 15 minutes. That's it. I find out more things about a patient than sometimes their family knows. And that is key to helping a patient get well.
So you have the right questions to ask.
Yes.
What 3 things could anyone listening incorporate now to increase well-being?
Oh my goodness, what 3 things? I think cleaning up your household chemicals. I think that goes for everybody. I think that's really important. It goes from anything to artificial fragrance that we use to keep our houses smelling good. I think it goes to cleaning products. Most of us live in airtight houses, and we work in airtight buildings. So we're getting a lot of dirty air. I think wherever we can, we need to take responsibility for the chemicals in our houses and the air we breathe. I think that's one of the things. Obviously, I think, diet, nutrition is very, very important. And I think diet, nutrition is very personal for each person. So I think we can kind of key into that. I think we need to get regular amounts of sleep. I think in the West, emphasis on regular sleep and that unfolding, or that folding in process, is not glorified. It's sort of like what we do, who we are in the world, and not really like, how do you fold inward? There is more of a collective consciousness about yin and about restorative time and space that has to do with sleep. I think that's another thing. And, obviously what we put on our bodies is another very, very important factor, how we take care of us. It can be just something simple as like change out your soap. Start with that. It can be something that switch your shampoo. It could be change your perfume. It could be anything. But I think, you have to think about your air. You have to think about, what you're breathing, what you're putting on your skin, and what you're ingesting. And those 3 things are very, very important. Obviously, sleep as well. So 4.
Yeah, and yeah, and the
Bonus.
I felt like you were also saying with the sleep part that it also that a big aspect of it is the unwinding. Did I get that right?
Right. So, okay. So this is another lovely, I want to say fight I have with my patients. So a lot of people have TVs in their bedroom, and that is a huge no-no. So, for thousands of years, we've been on this planet, and we've had to really wake with the rising sun and go to bed with the setting sun. That helps us make more serotonin and melatonin, which are chemicals that help with depression and help with sleep. Now we have artificial lights. We've had them for about 80, probably 80 to 100 years. And with modernization, we have seen a whole host of sleep disorders and other issues happen. And so I don't know, here in South Florida, we have these hurricanes that come through that knock our power out. And so we have to operate with the setting sun and the rising sun to get things done because our power's out. And a phenomenon that we do see here is we sleep like bears when there's hurricanes here because we're outside in our yard, we're cleaning it up. And then we're up with the rising sun. We go to bed with the setting sun because we don't have power. And because of that, that's an incredible message about our sleep cycles. And so I always tell that story. It's very pertinent for my patients down here to really understand light and light cycles. And so, I have patients put lights on a dimmer. I think walking around in blue blocker sunglasses are an extreme, but I think some people do need them. And really emphasize that ritual and unfolding process that we do anywhere from 5, 6, 7 to hopefully bedtime before 11 o'clock, which is Chinese bedtime. And nobody's putting value on that. It's just who you are in the world. What's your social media look like? How much money do you make? Nobody's really like, oh, wow, here I am unfolding before bed. I do think that we're seeing a rise of that. There's some really great people on social media that to emphasize the value of ritual, of sleep, but it's not really a popular thing.
No, but I think people are starting to become so tired.
Right. Well, people are wiped out, and I think things like computers and phones, it does something to our brain. It does something as far as dopamine goes in our minds or our brain chemistry. Obviously, our serotonin and our melatonin are completely messed up because of artificial light. And, listeners have to really think about like that. You know what? Like when you're on a vacation or when you're on a tour, they get you up really easily. They get you up really early. You're out all day. You're out in the light, even if it's a cloudy day. And then you're passing out at the end of the day. Well, that's because you've been exposing yourself to natural light, even if it's a cloudy day. And that's where that phenomenon happens. And so I will ask a patient, like, if, when you're on vacation, do you sleep better? And they're like, yeah, I never really thought about that. And there is the proof that, they have that light bulb moment, like, they're not watching TV at bedtime.
Yeah.
Maybe they're checking their phones, but, that's a really, really important health factor and actually mood factor that a lot of people aren't thinking about is how do you unfold at the end of the day?
I like that. Unfold. Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to add for our listeners?
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm going to look at my page here. So hang on a second. I did have to bring a cheat sheet. Let's see. Let me see here. I think, I think if listeners are fortunate to have a grandparent alive, a grandmother, a great grandparent, talk to them, listen to how they lived. I have a trademark called Ancient Wisdom for Modern Women that I created probably 10, 15 years ago, before a lot of this was going on as far as health. And both of my grandmothers were my muses and how they lived. My grandmother was born at the turn of the century when there were no refrigerators, there were no cars, and listening to her stories really shaped a lot of what I do today, because those stories really help people understand. My grandmother had to go to the store every day. My old fort was her icebox. And that icebox probably contained like this much food. And that much food was all people could buy for that day. And people are really disconnected to their food sources and really their connection about the earth, what they had to do, how they walked, and how they lived their lives with a lot of ritual, because that's what they had to keep them healthy. And we need to really tap into those older generations to hear how they lived, to really learn those messages. And for those listeners who are lucky to have a grandparent who lives in a foreign country, listen to how they had a garden, listen to how they had to get their food and how they lived, because those are really keys for modern women today, how to move forward and use those principles of how our grandparents or our grandmothers lived for today and for well-being.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that you spoke to your grandmothers about that and that they were your muses.
My grandmothers were my muses. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you for adding that.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you so much for being on the show. And
you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I wish I could pop over to Miami and see you in your practice, but this is really amazing.
And just to let listeners know, I do see patients virtually. So if anybody's interested, I think you'll have my website. People can always contact me through my website. Yeah. I do a lot of virtual consults as well.
Oh, cool.
And really just little by little, you don't have to do it in a day, baby steps. If food is too difficult, look at other variables in your life. Talk to your grandparents, talk to your grandma, talk to your great-grandparents, if you're lucky enough to have them. Really, we started seeing more longevity when we started living with 3 generations under one roof. And that's a really important fact for listeners to hear, because a lot of us are disconnected to our parents and our grandparents, and our great-grandparents and our grandparents are gems that we can really tap into a lot of wonderful information. And I would highly suggest, call your grandma, call your great-grandmother, and just listen to their stories about how they lived, and really try to glean as much as you possibly can from them. They're wise women, and they have a lot to tell us and share with us.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. I hope you will take the time to review this podcast on iTunes and let me know what you think of it. Holistic health is such an important topic, and it goes hand in hand with environmentalism. Many things that are bad for our health are also bad for the environment. If you have any questions for Elizabeth, I'll be sharing her details for her social media accounts on powerwomeningreen.com. Don't hesitate to ask her a question, and as she said in the interview, she's also available for one-on-one sessions with clients, so don't hesitate to reach out to her. Thank you for listening to the Power Women in Green podcast. Learn how to greenify your life by heading over to powerwomeningreen.com. Here you can find the latest green news and the best eco products from my favorite kind businesses.